Smoke-filled medieval cathedral interior in 15th century Italy, shattered stained glass, torchlight cutting through dust, abandoned pews, cinematic historical realism. A young nun in a soot-stained white habit crouched behind a stone altar, fear and resolve on her face. Low candlelight, dramatic shadows, cinematic close-up. Medieval cathedral nave viewed from behind a pillar, armed soldiers moving cautiously, civilians hiding, tense atmosphere, historical cinematic lighting. An ancient Italian port city under siege, breached stone walls, smoke columns rising into the sky, 15th century warfare, epic cinematic wide shot. A hill outside a medieval city at dawn, rows of kneeling figures silhouetted against the sky, soldiers standing behind them, restrained historical depiction. A burning city street in medieval Italy, soldiers marching in formation, civilians fleeing, smoke-filled air, cinematic realism. A convent courtyard moments before destruction, white-robed nuns gathered in prayer, early morning light, quiet before chaos. A medieval harbor filled with captured civilians guarded by soldiers, wooden ships waiting offshore, somber cinematic tone. A wide view of the Adriatic Sea at sunset, Ottoman ships moving eastward, captives visible on deck, haunting historical atmosphere. A group of women seated on a ship's deck, bound and exhausted, staring toward the horizon, non-graphic, cinematic realism. A medieval slave market courtyard in the Balkans, stone walls, guarded enclosures, buyers observing silently, historical documentary style. A holding cell lit by narrow shafts of daylight, women sitting shoulder to shoulder, muted expressions, 15th century realism. Close-up of clasped hands gripping a torn habit, dirt under fingernails, silent endurance, cinematic macro shot. A medieval merchant examining ledgers beside guarded captives, commerce, a quiet household interior in Ottoman territory, a captive woman performing domestic labor, subdued lighting, restrained cinematic tone. A candlelit room where survivors whisper their stories to one another, faces half in shadow, intimate historical scene. A map of the Mediterranean in the 15th century, marked trade routes and ports, cinematic documentary visualization. A Venetian port at dusk, merchant ships docked, refugees disembarking quietly, hopeful but cautious atmosphere. A medieval scribe recording testimony by candlelight, quill scratching parchment, solemn historical realism. A dim Vatican chamber lined with manuscripts, church officials reading reports in silence, weight of history, cinematic lighting. Close-up of handwritten Latin text on aged parchment, ink faded, margins filled with notes, historical documentary detail. A lone woman standing at a window overlooking Venice, wearing simple secular clothing, contemplative mood, cinematic realism. A narrow alley in Venice at night, church bells echoing faintly, sense of refuge and survival. A gathering of diplomats and clerics listening intently, medieval chamber, candlelight illuminating serious faces. A symbolic shot of an extinguished candle beside a lit one, loss and endurance, cinematic metaphor. A ruined convent years later, roof collapsed, weeds growing through stone, silent aftermath, historical realism. A weathered city gate at Otranto decades after the siege, peaceful now, heavy with memory. A quiet hill overlooking the sea at sunrise, empty and still, cinematic closure shot. A woman writing alone at a wooden table, aging hands steady, testimony preserved. Intimate historical scene, a monastery library with shelves of untouched manuscripts, dust floating in sunlight, forgotten history atmosphere. A single manuscript resting on a wooden lectern, bound in worn leather, cinematic close-up. A montage-style wide shot of Mediterranean coastlines, symbolizing raids and movement, epic documentary tone. A candle burning low beside a rosary and folded cloth, faith transformed, cinematic symbolism. A medieval city street restored after war, daily life resumed, echoes of past suffering. A survivor meeting another woman years later, recognition and shared memory in their eyes, restrained emotion. A sealed archive door with iron hinges, secrets locked away, cinematic historical metaphor. A slow pan across names written on parchment, representing lost women solemn documentary style. A final wide shot of the Adriatic Sea at dawn, calm waters hiding violent history, cinematic ending. The fall of Otranto did not end with fire and blood. For the women who survived, it marked the beginning of something colder and more deliberate. They were gathered at the harbor, guarded, counted, and divided. Not randomly, not in anger, but according to rules that had been refined through decades of conquest. Ottoman warfare did not end when the walls fell. It transitioned into administration. Sister Lucia stood among hundreds of women, her hands bound, her habit torn, watching ships being prepared. She realized that survival was not mercy. It was selection. Across the Adriatic, markets already existed for people like her. The journey east was short, but it changed everything. With every mile of open water, Otranto became memory instead of home. On deck, women were kept silent, watched, evaluated, spoken about as if they were cargo. Lucia listened. She learned that captives were classified. Some would be sold quickly, some distributed as rewards, some held for later profit. Value was assigned based on age, health, education, and reputation. Faith did not matter. Humanity did not matter. Only usefulness. When they arrived in Ottoman territory, the system revealed itself fully. Holding pens, examinations, ledgers, buyers who knew exactly what they wanted. This was not chaos. It was commerce. Lucia understood something critical in those days. If this was a system, then it could be described. And if it could be described, it could be exposed. She began to memorize everything. Names, places, routes, prices. Not because she believed she would escape, but because someone had to remember how this worked. Survival, she realized, could become resistance. Lucia survived captivity not through strength, but through observation. For more than a year, she lived inside the machinery of conquest, passed between households, watching how women disappeared into cities, into silence, into lives that history would never record. She listened to others, women from Otranto, from Greece, from islands whose names were already fading from memory. Each story added another piece to the pattern. Then history intervened. The death of the Ottoman Sultan destabilized the empire. Trade slowed, control weakened, and in that moment of uncertainty, cracks appeared in the system. Through a network of merchants and clergy, Lucia escaped. When she reached Christian territory, she carried no documents, no proof, only memory. But memory was enough. Her testimony reached Rome. It described not only the deaths of men, but the ongoing destruction of women. Not a single massacre, but a continuous process that stretched across borders and years. That was what changed everything. The Church had known how to honor martyrdom. It did not know how to speak about survival. Lucia forced it to listen anyway. She spent the rest of her life gathering accounts, tracking the missing, recording fragments of truth wherever she found them. She became something rare in history, a woman whose purpose was to remember what others preferred to forget. The men of Otranto died in a day. The women carried the consequences for a lifetime. And because Lucia chose to remember, their story did not disappear completely.